There's nothing harder than telling someone that the dreams they're having are not the dreams that are going to come true. And even worse, that the dreams they're having would not make them happy. If you have little children, you have probably encountered this, like a little child wants to be Batman, or they want brownies for dinner, and you know that actually ultimately will make someone sick. But that's a little child. But you do have to develop the skills of how to reason with a child without disappointing them. And I guess some parents succumb to the idea of maybe telling little white lies, or sometimes lying, like, yeah, you'll get brownies later. And then when later comes, the child is told, oh, no, we don't have brownies. I actually remember to this day, we moved to New York, and I hated the city. I was a little nature nymph, and I was crying so hard, and my poor mother. And she finally said to me, give it a year, and if you don't like it, we'll move. And I went, fine, okay. And it must have been about 8 or 9. And a year later, I said, okay, let's go. And she said, what are you talking about? And I said, you told me, if after a year I still hated it, we could leave. And I hate it. And she's like, oh, we're not leaving, honey. I'm so sorry, but, we just can't pick up and leave. To this day, I remember that. It was, I don't even know what to say, such a breach of trust. I can understand her side of it as well, which is, we're moving, life is already hard, my child is crying. I'm going to say anything rational at the moment to get out of this and help her with her emotions. But I still remember that happened to this day. When I cross over, I'll probably talk to her about it. But when you're doing readings for somebody, and this happens a lot, people want to know, typically on the psychic hotlines, I've worked 2 of those in my life. They're just a nightmare for me to work. And there are a lot of good psychics in some of those lines. So I'm not putting them all down. I'm not saying they're fake or phony or the people are horrible. But it didn't fit me. And people always call about love, money, career. And it's hard because the feeling is, if I just get one of those things, I'll be better. What is it, P? Come in, good girl. And for the psychics with no integrity, they will tell you what you want to hear. I had one hotline person they were looking to hire, and they said, just throw out tarot cards and then just start telling the story, and that'll work. In other words, she was telling me, just make shit up. So, needless to say, I did not work there. I just thought, wow, that's incredible. But it is true that if there was a study done that I think something like 85 to 87% of people, when they work with psychics, will hear it in a way that gives them what they want. In other words, this sort of their brain misinterprets the information to make it work for them, to make them feel better. So it almost doesn't matter what you say. And I've seen that in action with people I've done readings with. So if you have integrity as a reader and somebody says, I want to have kids, and you say, well, you may have kids, but you will never be a stay-at-home mom. Come on, Pia, let's go. It will never be the fantasy that you're having. So in other words, my tuning into them is not just that they want to have kids, but they want it to look a certain way. Not that they have kids and then they work 2 jobs to support the child and they're never at home with the child and their job drives them crazy and now their child has to see a therapist. So the pain of telling someone what you think is going to make you happy right now isn't going to happen, and if you force it to happen, it's not going to make you happy. It's not going to look like what you want it to look like. So how do you work with that information in a way that doesn't depress the other person or get them upset? Also, by the way, it does not make you commercially viable. I'm never going to be commercially viable. And if you don't have a spiritual practice, you are typically a person who has a lot riding on outcomes and desires. There's not a lot of objectivity. A lot of people can't do, for example, readings for themselves because it's too painful to do a reading and the reading says, no, this isn't going to work out, but here's what you're going to learn. Okay, it's too hot to go further, right, guys? Okay, come on, let's go back. It's too hot already. Typically, people who come for readings rarely have a good spiritual practice. There are some people, I mean, I've gotten readings when I've needed them, but it's not very often. But typically it's people who are, let's say, ruled by the priorities of the 3D world. Meaning, if it's the material world that affects them the most. And I'll hear things like, oh, I've been meditating and self-care and, I'm doing my spiritual practice and I'm just sick of it. And that's kind of an indicator. That's like saying, I've been going on vacations and eating great food and having wonderful lovemaking, and I'm just sick of it. Your spiritual practice should be something you adore, that in a world of insanity, you find peace, and you're not meditating so that you can finally get what you want in the 3D world. But a lot of people don't use their spiritual practice that way. They do it as a way to get through and enough things to finally get to where it's better in the 3D world, or they do it because they think it's going to change their outcomes for the better somehow. But your spiritual practice should be a place of refuge, a place of fantasy, ecstasy, peace, and yes, sometimes a place of healing and having lessons become more clear or more tolerable. So helping someone to understand that what they're longing for, that they think is going to make them happy, that whenever it's something outside of us, that will never make us happy for long. Never. If you need proof, look at all the extremely wealthy people who are insane, druggies, miserable, divorces, drama, etc. You would think with all that money, come on, Pia, let's go. Good girl. She likes to go behind me, and then I can't keep an eye on her for coyotes, so. So if you're longing for a relationship, there's nothing wrong with that. But first, I want to go inside and find out what's really going on that I think an external relationship would solve my problems or make me feel better. Because it would for a while, but then guaranteed that won't last. And this is really hard work to do. It's really hard to do this because each person is different. They're in a different stage of development. And it's really hard to not have desires when you're in the physical world. It's really hard. I mean, you get hungry, you get tired, you want sex, you don't want sex, you want money, you want a better job. That's the world that we live in. So it's not about not having desires. It's more about learning to balance out those desires and to use those desires as a way of reading your internal well-being and taking your own pulse, your own temperature, to find out what's really going on. And when we address that, the desires go more into perspective, like, okay, I still would like a relationship, but it's not gnawing at me like it was before. I still want more money, but it's not ruining my days like it was before. And that's a depressing message for a lot of people. Like, what? I have to go do more internal work? And what I want to say is, oh, would you rather learn it the hard way by chasing down a relationship because you're so hungry for it, so you kind of make it work even though there's all these red flags? How many times have we seen people do this? How many times have I done it in the past? Right? Like, oh, I want a relationship, and oh, this one is meant to be, and then later I go, how could I have not seen on those red flags? Well, because my desires, my hunger, my need, my emptiness, my pain wiped out those red flags. And on the other side of it, sometimes that need or desire or that hunger drives us towards a lesson that we're meant to have. That is another side of it as well. So what's the point of this whole discussion is when you are having a longing for something outside of you, unless you do the internal work, you won't know if that's a real pull by spirit towards the next step. Like, I feel this is coming, and so I'm kind of going towards it because I feel like it's coming anyway. So I'm following the current of the ocean of energy I live in. Or is it a wounded part of yourself that thinks that all of you feels this coming, when really it's just that wounded part or that lonely part that you're not addressing inside of you that is leading you, and you think it's your intuition? And you can talk about this with someone in a reading, and they can get it cognitively, but it's not going to address the issue. In this case, the only thing that will address what's going on is energy work, or I like to do parts work with this that is very energetic. The parts work that I do with people, almost every time, if not, so far it has been every time, but I'm going to throw in almost just in case my memory is not perfect. It is like a psychedelic trip. It is this deep internal journey that is fleshed out, filled out with furniture, texture, food, ambiance. I mean, you're just really there. And when you come out of this internal discussion, you are shifted. Almost always people are in a completely altered state. A lot of times there's exhaustion and a lot of sleeping afterwards, but definitely for the next days you are completely different. And we can talk about what I just talked about forever, but if you are really having a longing for an external solution, and you're not sure if it's your wounded part guiding you, and you think it's some guidance, but it's not guidance, it's pain, hunger, sadness, loneliness, anxiety, fear, disappointment, or greed. The only thing that's going to address that is some kind of real work, typically with someone else, until you learn to do this work for yourself. And you can learn to do this work for yourself, but it takes a while. It's like, learning to play the cello or the violin. It's not something you just pick up and do. In the meantime, be careful of chasing down readers who will tell you things like my mother had to tell me in order to make you feel better. A lot of readers do it for money because they make you feel better, and then it doesn't happen, and then the story is, well, you did something wrong, so I'm going to give you another reading. That's the new age marketing, is if it doesn't work out the way you want it to, you did something wrong. And other readers will do that because they can't tolerate your pain. So they'll tell you whatever they feel they need to tell you because they want to make you feel better. And they think that's a service, like my mom did for me. Just a reminder, free introductory session, 30 minutes. Go to my website, drmarie.org, drmarie, marie.org, and see if you want to jump in. More later.